Good evening. This is All India Radio. I am Saira Mujtaba with the news at 9. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts G20 will act as a catalyst for global change under India's presidency. G20 leaders resolve to jointly fight global hunger and malnutrition. On National Press Day, Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur calls upon media to play a more constructive role in building a new India. Uttarakhand High Court to be shifted to Haldwani from Nainital. Mass protests erupt in Pakistan's port city of Gwadar against China-backed projects. NASA launches Artemis mission on a test flight to the moon. Paddler Sharad Kamal becomes first Indian player to be elected to the International Table Tennis Federation. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said a sense of trusteeship is the solution for the safe future of the planet. Addressing the closing session of G20 summit in Bali, the Prime Minister said that the Lifestyle for Environment campaign can make a big contribution to solve global problems.
प्लेनेट के सुरक्षित भविष्य के लिए ट्रस्टीशिप का भाव ही समाधान है। इसमें लाइफ यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरनमेंट अभियान एक बड़ा योगदान दे सकता है। इसका उद्देश्य सस्टेनेबल लाइफस्टाइल को एक जन आंदोलन बनाना है। आज आवश्यकता है कि विकास के लाभ सर्वस्पर्शी और सर्वसमावेशी हो।
Indonesian President Joko Widodo symbolically handed over the G20 presidency to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Bali today. India will officially assume the G20 presidency from the 1st of December. Speaking at the handing over ceremony of the presidency of the G20, he assured the world leaders that India's presidency of G20 will be inclusive, ambitious, decisive and action-oriented. He said global development is not possible without women's participation and asserted that women-led development should be a priority in the G20 agenda. The Prime Minister said efforts will be made to make the G20 a catalyst for global change.
आज मैं ये आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं कि अगले एक साल में हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि G20 नए विचारों की परिकल्पना के लिए और सामूहिक एक्शन को गति देने के लिए एक ग्लोबल प्राइम मूवर की तरह काम करे.
He said India will organize G20 meetings in different states and cities, and the guests will experience India's diversity, inclusive tradition, and cultural richness. The next G20 summit will be held on the 9th and 10th of September next year in New Delhi. G20 nations have expressed deep concern over the challenges to global food security due to conflicts and tensions and have resolved to take urgent steps to save lives, prevent hunger and malnutrition. In a joint declaration after the G20 summit in Bali, member nations called for a commitment to protect the most vulnerable from hunger and address the global food crisis. Referring to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the declaration echoed Prime Minister Modi's message that today's era must not be of war. Yesterday, Mr. Modi had called for a return to the path of ceasefire and diplomacy to resolve the Ukraine conflict. It said it has adversely impacted the global economy and is causing immense suffering. The declaration said it is essential to uphold international law and the multilateral system that safeguards peace and stability. It added that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible and the peaceful resolution of conflicts, efforts to address crisis, as well as diplomacy and dialogue are vital. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron met in Bali and reviewed bilateral cooperation on the sidelines of the G20 summit today. Both the leaders discussed regional and global developments. Mr. Modi also had bilateral talks with Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Mr. Modi described Singapore as an important pillar of India's Act East policy. The Prime Minister also met German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and discussed ways to boost economic ties, defence collaboration and other important issues. He is also scheduled to have bilateral meetings with the leaders of Indonesia, Spain, Italy, Australia and the United Kingdom. Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur has called upon the media to play a greater and more constructive role in building a new India as the stature of the nation rises globally. Mr. Thakur was speaking at a function celebrating the National Press Day in New Delhi. He said a vibrant democracy like India needs a vibrant press. Mr. Thakur said the Press Council needs to encourage the promotion of diverse views, protection of women journalists and representation from the transgender community. The minister said much of the media governance structure is self-regulatory, but it is not a license to err.
Much of the media governance structure is self-regulatory, but self-regulatory does not mean license to err and err intentionally. That would erode media credibility, bias and prejudice must be abjured.
Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra has said that social media has reduced the loss of lives in natural calamities. Speaking at the first World Media Congress in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, UAE today, Mr. Chandra said that India has over 1.2 billion mobile phone users and 600 million smartphone users. He added that with very low data rates, penetration of smartphones has resulted in users consuming high amount of information and entertainment via mobile devices. In Gujarat, tomorrow is the last day for the filing of nominations in the second phase of polling for the Legislative Assembly. In the second phase, voting for the 93 seats will be held on the 5th of December. Our correspondent reports that the final number of candidates in the first phase will also be decided tomorrow.
Candidates can withdraw their names till tomorrow for the first phase of polling. In the first phase, out of 182 assembly seats in the state, voting will be held on 89 seats on 1st of December. There are now 999 candidates in the fray in this phase. The BJP has released a list of 3 more candidates today. The party has so far declared its candidates for 181 assembly seats in the state, except the Manjalpur seat of Vadodara district. With Sanjeev Sharma, Aparna Khun, AR News, Ahmedabad.
In Jammu and Kashmir, 8 people, including 4 women, were killed when a taxi skidded off the road and fell into a gorge at Alsar village in Kishtwar district this evening. Deputy Commissioner Kishtwar, Devansh Yadav, said that the accident took place near Alsar village, 95 kilometers from Kishtwar, when the driver of the vehicle lost control. He said the search operation is underway. The Uttarakhand High Court will be shifted from Nainital to Haldwani. The decision was taken at a cabinet meeting chaired by Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami in Dehradun today. Uttarakhand cabinet has also decided to amend the conversion law to make forced conversion as a cognizable offence. Our correspondent reports that a bill to this effect will be brought in the Assembly. The Ministry of Civil Aviation has said that with the declining number of COVID cases, wearing of masks is no longer mandatory during air travel. However, the ministry added that in-flight announcements will only mention that wearing of masks or face covers by passengers is preferred in the light of the threat posed by COVID-19. It said any specific reference to fine and penal action need not be announced henceforth. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Northeast Diary program, broadcast every Thursday and Sunday at 5:30 p.m. brings very interesting and enchanting stories from the 8 Indian states of Northeast India. Northeast Diary this week, that is 17th of November, brings an exclusive interview with Opang Jamir, a fashion model, assistant editor of Northeast Window magazine and curator for handloom and sustainable fashion. Looking forward to see you there.
Welcome back. You're listening to News at 9. Pakistan's port city of Gwadar is witnessing massive protests, with protesters threatening to block projects under the so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) if the demands are not met by the 20th of November. According to a Pakistani media report, hundreds of children joined the ongoing protests in Gwadar, which entered its 18th day on Sunday. The protesters are threatening to block CPEC projects if the demands are not met within a week. The demands include a clampdown on illegal trawling in Gwadar and the elimination of unnecessary checkpoints, among others. Meanwhile, our Beijing correspondent reports that China has tried to play down the reports of protests against the CPEC projects in Gwadar amid growing concerns about the security of hundreds of Chinese personnel working in Pakistan. In response to a question on Tuesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning at a media briefing in Beijing labelled the reports as false. The protests are part of a series of protests by locals against the China-funded CPEC. The port city of Gwadar was rocked by month-long protests last December as well. The U.S. space agency NASA launched the Artemis 1 mission today from Kennedy Space Center, Florida. Artemis is the most powerful rocket ever designed by NASA. It will be the first integrated flight test of NASA's deep space exploration systems that will enable human exploration to the Moon and Mars. No astronauts are on board the mission. Artemis 1 will not land on the Moon, but the spacecraft will orbit nearby before returning to the Earth in 26 days. The United Kingdom has approved 3,000 visas for young professionals from India to work in the country each year. The UK Prime Minister's office said the UK-India Young Professionals Scheme offers 3,000 visas to graduates between the ages of 18 and 30 years to come to live in the UK and work for up to 2 years. Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan today chaired a high-level meeting on the preparations for the upcoming G20 summit to be held in India next year. During the meeting, Mr. Pradhan said that education is one of the priority areas in G20. He said India's G20 presidency is an opportunity to present India's template for education, which can be a model for all emerging economies. Mr. Pradhan called for involving students, educational and skilling institutions to make the summit a grand success. The minister also suggested showcasing the rich heritage of Indian knowledge systems and making participants aware of the contribution of India to the world. President Draupadi Murmu has said that women empowerment is essential to make India self-reliant and a developed nation. Addressing a conference of women's self-help groups in Bhopal today, the President stressed on the need to create an environment in which women feel free and fearless and can make full use of their potential. Stating that economic self-reliance is an effective means to empower women, the President said women's self-help groups are good platforms for bringing women together and taking them forward in various directions of progress. Earlier this morning, the President visited Madhya Pradesh Tribal Museum in Bhopal. The museum showcases the tribal culture, traditions, customs, paintings and artifacts of the tribes of the region. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar emphasized that transparency and accountability in public service delivery is key to good governance. He was speaking after inaugurating the second Audit Divas at the Office of the Controller and Auditor General in New Delhi. He said the reputation of the CAG at the global level is well recognized as a robust auditing organization. India's star paddler Achant Sharat Kamal has become the country's first player to get elected into the Athletes Commission of the International Table Tennis Federation. 8 athletes, including 4 male and 4 female, were elected from Asia, Africa, the Americas, Europe and Oceania and will serve in the Athletes Commission for 4 years from 2022 to 2026. In a release issued by Table Tennis Federation of India, Sharat thanked the voters for their affection and faith in him. Earlier this week, Sharat was named for the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award this year, the country's highest sporting recognition. He will receive the honour later this month. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast for tomorrow. National capital Delhi is likely to have misty sky. Temperature will hover between 12 and 27 degrees Celsius. Mumbai is expected to have a mainly clear sky. Kolkata will have a mainly clear sky as well, while Chennai is expected to have a generally cloudy sky with light rain. And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts G20 will act as a catalyst for global change under India's presidency. G20 leaders resolve to jointly fight global hunger and malnutrition. On National Press Day, Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur calls upon media to play a more constructive role in building a new India. Uttarakhand High Court to be shifted to Haldwani from Nainital. Mass protests erupt in Pakistan's port city of Gwadar against China-backed projects. NASA launches Artemis mission on a test flight to the moon. And paddler Sharat Kamal becomes first Indian player to be elected to the ITTF. That's all in the news at 9. Good night.